that was approved, and now the Prime Minister and the government of St. Lucia looking for the legal approval to spend that money. With me this afternoon is Primus Hutchinson. Primus, we noticed that a number of members have already taken up their seats, and some of them in the wings, carrying out some conversation to keep the momentum going, and probably just awaiting the start of the presentation by the Prime Minister.
Yes, Ryan, thank you, and thank you, viewers. Of course, as you indicated, Ryan, this budgetary session is to highlight the fiscal policies of government and the many ways to navigate the challenges, and of course, consequently, to endeavor to establish a level economic playing field, so to speak. This is known as the appropriation bill, and of course, this will guide the government for the next financial year 2019-2020 on the various programs, government programs.
Yes, and quite interesting that this session of Parliament is started as usual with the throne speech by the Governor General, His Excellency Emmanuel Neville Snap, and that gave us an indication as to exactly what the policy statement would be, especially to be delivered this afternoon, what we are actually awaiting. We had the figures, those figures were approved, but now the Prime Minister will actually outline the actual policy statement which they plan to follow.
Of course, Ryan, and perhaps at this time I need to establish that in Creole. Monsieur Madame Ryan nous ici pour la présentation du Premier ministre là, qui a présenté budget pour parler principalement sur plan gouvernement pour l'année l'année prochaine. Le budget que Ryan dit c'est à hauteur de $1 billion. $691 millions, $689 000. Programme ça c'est pour l'année ça la continuation l'année prochaine. C'est ça qui a fait ici nous avons qui ça généralement c'est une présentation qui a duré en temps passé. Le Premier ministre a duré pour aider les éditeurs alors nous avons c'est comme ça et so and perhaps the presentation may last perhaps the next 2.5, 3 hours or so. Perhaps.
Yes.
It may probably go a little longer or less than that.
Yes, but keeping with the trend, we probably maybe look at just about 2 hours, maybe maximum. It can go a bit beyond that, but that might more likely be the situation this time around. We expect that we'll be having the start of the session anytime soon. We will see the Sergeant at Arms, Alex Morgan. He will precede the Speaker of the House in this actual session. And any moment now we are going to have the authority of the mace being established in the House of Assembly when members take the seat and the Speaker, Andy Daniel, takes control of the session. Just for the information of our viewers as well, Primus, and those who might be listening to us on other media outlets, is that a member actually moves the motion for the Prime Minister to present the appropriation bill, because it is just like any other bill that comes before the House of Parliament, and that will need to be the formality before we get the proceedings going, not just in case the Prime Minister gets up and presents his bill. A member introduces it, and they vote on it, they get permission, and also it is quite useful to know that during that motion being moved, the member also seeks to get the standing order waived to allow the Prime Minister to present his budget uninterrupted. If not, he will have to do so at some particular point in time later in his presentation.
Okay. Sir Ryan, tu expliquer là, monsieur, madame, c'est ça qu'a fait qu'au premier ministre session du Parlement, côté un membre parlement pour de vote pour présenter motion que le Premier ministre là qu'a présenté et là speaker ni pour poser ça devant le membre parlement, pour le membre parlement ok d'accord et pour le Premier ministre là procéder avec présentation. C'est comme ça qu'il a fait toute session parlement, c'est pas un qui est différent. C'est ça Ryan expliqué à un petit moment là, c'est ça qu'il a fait tout à l'heure les Speaker Atwe Kumasi Session Ryan. And of course, we see Ryan, a number of members of the opposite already seated, and of course, members of the on the government side. So we expect any time from now, any minute from now, the speaker will make his entrance to begin the proceedings this afternoon.
Yes, Primus. The member for Castro Central, the Honorable Sarah Fred Bobray, she was in the chamber very, very early. And I also know that the member for Labrie, Alpha Baptiste, was also around pretty early, milling around and greeting members of the Parliament office before he did enter. And then we noticed that the Honorable Gail Rigobert, the member for Miko North, was also in the house pretty early, as well as the member for Chazelle Saltibus. He also came in early in the proceedings, Honorable Bradley Felix. So then we had a steady arrival of the members of the Parliament. You can also see that the Honorable Stevenson King is already in, the leader of the opposition, Honorable Philip J. Pierre, as well as the Honorable Sean Edward, the member for Denry North, is in, and also the Honorable Ernest Hilaire, who has just joined his colleagues. So the Prime Minister just milling around, having some final words with some of his colleagues, and also members of staff from the Office of the Prime Minister in the wings. And we also know that a number of senators are also here, including opposition senators who are seated in the wings here in the parliamentary chamber. So, Primus, any moment now we know that the mace is going to be coming in with the Sergeant at Arms and placing his cradle, giving the actual authority of the Parliament, because nothing can happen without the mace being present. Even if the Speaker is in, the mace needs to be there for proceedings to carry on.
Okay. Just a light moment. Previously, Ryan, when the PM made mention of your attire, you want to share with us? You know, it was quite amusing actually. He seems to be fascinated by your attire, and he made reference to that a moment ago.
Yes, very much. So maybe just it also gives an opportunity to loosen up a bit for the start of his presentation. We noticed that he's been keeping steady check on some of the members of staff and those who have been associated with the presentation of these estimates, and those who might have come up with some of the policy. Now we noticed that the Honourable Member for Soufrière Fort Saint-Jacques, Honourable Herod Stanislaus, entering the chamber, and he's been in the spotlight of late with a number of developmental projects getting on the way in his constituency. So it'll be interesting to see what his presentation will be like. We know it's going to focus a lot on what he's been doing, and Soufrière certainly has been in for some transformation. I don't know how recently you've been in Soufrière, Primus, but with the bus terminal being in an advanced stage, the start turning ceremony for the facilities at the Soufrière Mini Stadium and also the Ruby Cricket Ground, and the opening of the Hummingbird Beach Park, which is really a wonderful sight.
Yes, I carried a few stories on the development, the sporting development in Soufrière, as well as other developments. Quite interesting, and of course the parliamentary rep was quite pleased with the recent developments so far as sporting infrastructural developments as far as sports is concerned in Soufrière.
We can also let our viewers know that the Honourable Edmund Estefan, the parliamentary representative for the South, is also already in the chamber. We told already of the two senators from the opposition side. Jerome Gideon is sitting to the right of his colleague there, and we know that Gideon Ferdinand, the other member from the opposition circles in the Senate, and other members of the Senate on the government side, they're also in. And we notice they're represented so far in the form as Honourable Neil Isaacs and Honourable Fortuna Bell Rose, both of them ministers in their own right. So we know that any time now the Sergeant at Arms will be in, and we will actually get the presentation going and the moving of the motion for the appropriation bill to be heard.
Perhaps what we can do now, whether it is to have, the acting budget director provide an insight into the budgetary Cycle, is it called? Maybe we can have the acting budget director to provide an insight in as far as that is concerned.
A budget is actually a plan, a financial plan that details your projected income, your projected expenditures. And this is something that's typically done not just by the government, but by average household, businesses, and of course, what is normally done is that you would engage in an exercise where you would have to estimate your revenues and your expenditures and to determine whether you have a surplus or deficit.
Okay. Now you talked about revenues. As I said, as we're speaking more in regards to the government, where would the government get the revenues from for the budget?
Well, typically, revenues would be derived from the taxes that the government would impose on the citizens. You would also have instances where friendly governments, donor organizations, giving grants to the government of St. Lucia, and that together with the taxes that are imposed, as well as other fees that are charged for other, for instance, you would have drugs and so on that are sold by the pharmacies, and other services generally that the government would charge for. All of these together would comprise the government's revenue for a given year.
Okay, all right. Now you also talked about expenditure. I guess in regards to that, I know that there are two types of government expenditure. I believe there's current expenditure and capital expenditure. Can you tell us a little bit about what the difference, well, first of all, what is current expenditure, what is capital expenditure, and what is the difference mainly between the two?
Yes. Well, current expenditure would normally involve expenditure on your normal operations. So, for instance, you pay salaries, your utility bills, and so on. So you have lots of fixed expenses that would be included as part of current expenditures. So for the government, for instance, wages and salaries, the debt servicing, the interest payments that are on the debt that the government has actually raised for a given year or in previous years, for instance. Subsidies that are given, grants, contributions, subventions, all of these things are considered to be part of the current government's current expenditure. As it relates to capital expenditure, it normally would entail the acquisition of assets. So for instance, if the government were buying a vehicle or constructing a building, these would be considered to be capital expenditure. So capital expenditure normally would require you to have the asset to have a useful life of more than 1 year. And so on that basis, you would record it as the capital expenditure.
Well, yes, that was a short clip from Paula Joseph, the acting budget director, giving us an idea of what an actual budget is. And maybe later, if we do have time, we can actually tell you what is the actual budget cycle. But we're back now with some live pictures from the chamber. You can see the Honorable Leader of the Opposition, Philip J. Pierre, in conversation with the member for Labrie, Parliamentary Representative Honorable Albert Baptiste, and the senators, as well as we told you, just behind them is partly in the shot. And like you said, the members of the Office of the Prime Minister. And also during the clip, we had the arrival of the member for Cash's Office, Honorable Guy Joseph, and he is now in the chamber exchanging some pleasantries, and we will be expecting that the Sergeant at Arms will be emerging anytime soon. The Primus, speaking about the Sergeant at Arms, there's a very special story about it because, you know, Sergeant Alex Morgan, he's the latest to become the Sergeant at Arms in Parliament. And what normally happens when we have Sergeant at Arms and we see that there's sometimes a change, it reflects that there has been some promotion within the ranks of the force. And when sessions of Parliament are not on, the Sergeant at Arms, which is his title within the chamber, now resumes his duties as a sergeant. on normal police duties. So that is something quite interesting as well to know, and probably when people see that there are changes within the Parliament, the Sergeant Arms, these are some of the reasons why. And I think this is some interesting stories that the public needs to know.
Okay. Monsieur, Madame, quand ça nous a ici là, dans tout moment, parce que speaker quand fait quand entrer tout moment, nous avons fait pour, mais en même temps nous avons si mon parlement a engagé en discussion, nous avons partenaire Ryan qui a parlé qui représentatif pour Australie Canary, on a Dominic Fede territoire et aussi représentatif pour Castro South East et on a Guy Joseph qui aussi et que tous ces membres parlement en discussion et puis on a l'autre construit speaker pour entrer à le Parlement pour commencer la session après-midi. Alors tout le monde a une discussion, il y a les membres Sénat là aussi, qui là, ça c'est, ça c'est membres, comme je dis, c'est membres Sénat là, là à présent, votre Madame Fortuna Bell Rose là, et deux ou trois les autres. Et comment qu'a parlé moi représentatif pour Sud Vieux-Fort, ça c'est façade Nord Vieux-Fort, on a Moses Jean-Baptiste entré à Caille Concite pour le moment qu'aspect cette session a commencé ici à après-midi, messieurs et mesdames.
Yes, Prime Minister, some useful observation. And while the chamber is continuing to be occupied, we also notice that the gallery is also filling up. And what we would actually be anticipating now is that within the office of the Parliament, the clerk, who will also be coming in almost simultaneously following the Speaker and the Sergeant at Arms, will be in final research and all the preparation for the actual sitting and the presentation of the appropriations bill and ensuring that everything is in order. You might have realized that on Thursday, at the completion of the debate on revenue and expenditure, there was a motion attempting to be made, to be laid on the table, just following members voted to actually approve the figures that were presented. And it was done so last year, but what we did notice, we had a 10-minute recess, and during that recess it was brought to the attention and made much more clear that despite the fact that it went that way last year, what would have needed to happen is that what was actually going to happen was a motion being brought forward to actually give permission to fund the budget or the appropriation bill. But what needed to be done, as was mentioned by the member for Vieux-Fort South, was that it needed to have come after the appropriation bill was tabled and passed, because that motion was actually going to seek the means of funding the budget or the appropriations for 2019-2020. And after the recess, it came over, and then we had the House being adjourned until the presentation today by the Prime Minister, his budget presentation and the tabling of the appropriation bill. So that was what actually happened on Thursday evening, and that was explained, and certainly the procedure kept in what it actually had to be, because it could not have actually looked to get means to fund the bill until it was actually passed. So we see the was still made in our own Prime Minister?
Quand nous avons fait pour Speaker qui a conduit à faire Parlement entrer, nous ne pouvons pas savoir raison, il peut pas ici, mais nous avons continué à se faire pour sa fête. En même temps, c'est même à Caille Concite qui a continué à causer.
Yes, Prime Minister. Well, maybe we have time for Ms. Paula Joseph to tell us a bit more on the budgetary cycle.
So
So let's see if we can get
We
this
say
through.
that the cycle is a 24-month cycle because what you have is a budget that would have been approved come end of March, beginning of April, and you begin the execution of that budget. But while you're executing, you're also planning for the next budget, which is for the next 12 months. So while you're executing over a 12-month period, you're also planning for a further 12-month period. So for instance, once the appropriation bill is passed, the government would generally issue what is called a general warrant, which allows ministries to be able to spend against the consolidated fund, although there are provisions that would allow you to be able to spend prior to that. But generally speaking, this is the mechanism that is usually used. Once a budget is passed by the end of March, you have your general warrant that allows you to be able to spend. Once that is done, you begin to execute, and as you execute, you begin to plan for the next fiscal year. And with respect to the government, the planning aspect actually would, much of the planning aspect would actually take place or commence closer to July, August, during which time we would have sent out a call circular to the ministries, but the ministries would have been doing their own internal planning from even before that period of time. And basically once the call goes out to them, then they go into full swing, putting together all the finishing touches to make the submission by October, November of the year.
Yes, Prime Minister, we just had Paula Joseph there speaking there on the budgetary cycle, bringing things into greater perspective. We've just got an update from the Office of Parliament informing us that we should be getting underway in about 5 minutes' time at about 5:30. So we're just going to continue with the description of what's happening within the chamber until that starting time, and to let you know that more and more members are actually coming in, and including more persons from the opposition side, and the Prime Minister taking an opportunity again to speak to members of his office. And we also know that we saw the entry of the Attorney General, who is now in conversation with the Prime Minister. And we have seen that the debate for the revenue and expenditure that was tabled last week, that brought some very interesting discussion, just to put it mildly, and it was in very good spirit. We saw the exchanges on both sides, but never was the Speaker, Andy Daniel, having to really go deep into any disciplinary action to discipline members, and it lent for a very good debate. And we saw the lighter side at times, but then again, we're within the chamber, and members exercise their parliamentary privilege and would, from time to time, just issue a few jabs at each other. But it was good, it was quite educational, and in between you get to know the sort of feeling between the members of the two sides of the House and what is likely, because I think in the interest of the people of St. Lucia, it is very important that both government and opposition work towards implementing and ensuring that the estimates provided in the budget, one in which that the various constituencies will benefit from, and the opposition to ensure that the interests of those that they represent are well catered for. So we saw a very useful debate on the figures, and we had the Prime Minister laying out his statement. We had the debate, and the rebuttal from members opposite. The Prime Minister, very interesting rebuttal, as we told you in the end, that brought a number of issues that were tabled during the presentation of the estimates of revenue and expenditure, and we're hoping that those same areas like health, housing, and matters that really important to the population will again become up, but more on the policy being outlined by the Prime Minister and Minister for Finance.
Ryan, comme dit, ça c'est mon parlement, tous les deux façades, car l'occasion pour discuter ce qu'il a fait, parler à ce se commune yo ka représenter et c'est divers weg qui gouvernement ka mettre en place pour gouverner développement pays sur ça qui dit pour faire c'est divers laisse là tous les façades là ka parler à ce avec la cani tu mettais à tu derrière et ça va qui normal et qui fait assez bien pour session première session à Caille Parlement ça passait assez bien tous les codes du coyo assez bien et que speaker partenaire qu'est-ce raison pour ça mettre personne à ce weg face à ça Ryan.
Yes, Prime Minister, and you know that the activity here today, the budget presentation and the tabling of the appropriation bill, is one time of the year that St. Lucians really look forward to in actually knowing what their business is going to be like, what areas the government of St. Lucia is their priority, and how they plan to execute it. So we are sure that members of the public will be tuned in, wanting to know what the policy statement will be like, know that they've had an idea of where some of the allocations will be going, just to get the actual policy and the debate, something that is always look forward to. I know that persons within the various communities always like to tune in when the representative is going to be making his presentation, and some of his senior staff in his office would come to the parliament. So we're expecting that it will be no different this year, and that the general population will be looking to see what is going to happen. Will this road be fixed? Will the water quality be improved? Will various areas, what's going on in education, what are some of the plans, what will happen as far as basic infrastructure for the government is concerned. We noticed that the member for Castries North, the Honorable Stevenson King, did lay out a number of priorities for his ministry and his constituency as far as the improvement to the road network is concerned. And there are a number of persons who have interest in that regard. People in the rural area, banana farmers who depend a lot on the quality of roads, bus drivers, and persons who generally commute within the various districts. Look how safe roads can be. We notice that the government has taken on a lot of safety work with a lot of barriers being placed. We anticipate that any time now the Honourable Speaker will be preceded by the Sergeant at Arms Primus, and we're going to have the start of today's sitting. The command, all to rise. Sergeant Alex Morgan comes in with the mace, placed into his cradle, followed by the deputy clerk and
let us pray.
The Speaker and the Danda.
Almighty God, by whom alone kings reign and princes decree justice, and from whom alone cometh all counsel, wisdom and understanding, we thy unworthy servants here gathered together in thy name, do most humbly beseech thee to send down thy heavenly wisdom from above, to direct and guide us in all our consultations. And grant that we, having thy fear always before our eyes, and laying aside all private interests, prejudices, and partial affections, the result of all our counsels may be to the glory of thy blessed name, the maintenance of true religion and justice, the safety, honor, and happiness of the Queen, the public will, peace and tranquility of St. Lucia, and the uniting and knitting together of all of the hearts of all persons and estates within the same, in true Christian love and charity, one towards another. Through Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen. The grace of our Lord Jesus Christ, and the love of God, and the fellowship of the Holy Ghost, be with us all evermore. Amen. Statements from ministers. Honorable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, hopefully all of my colleagues in Parliament would join me in our expressing our deepest sympathies to the government of France and also to the Vatican for what appears to be a catastrophic loss today for an incredibly historic site called Ile de Notre Dame. For those who did not know, the church caught a fire midday today, and unfortunately it would appear from the pictures that I've seen, Mr. Speaker, that a substantial amount of loss has been experienced. There is still no report, Mr. Speaker, as to the cause of the fire, and certainly whether in fact anybody has lost their life. But if I can express through you and maybe onwards missions to both to the government of France as well as to the Vatican itself about our greatest sympathies, and to express our solidarity with both the Vatican as well as with the people of France in this very, very difficult time. Thank you.
Papers to be laid. Honorable Minister for Economic Development, Housing, Urban Renewal, Transport and Civil Aviation.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I beg to lay the following paper standing in my name. Statutory Instrument Number 33 of 2019, St. Lucia National Housing Corporation, Forestier Castries, vesting order.
Bills. Honorable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to present for the first reading a bill shortly entitled the Appropriation 2019-2020.
Appropriation 2019-2020.
Honorable Prime Minister and Minister for Finance.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move for the suspension of Standing Orders 48-2 to enable this bill to go through its remaining stages at this sitting.
Honorable members, the question is that Standing Order 48-2 be suspended in order to allow the Honorable Prime Minister to proceed with the remaining stages of the bill at this sitting. I now put the question. As many as are of that opinion, say aye. Aye. As many as of a contrary opinion, say no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Leave is granted. Honorable Member for Castries North and Minister for Infrastructure.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move for the suspension of Standing Order 32-9 to enable the Honorable Prime Minister to uninterruptedly present the Appropriation 2019-2020 Bill for second reading.
Honorable members, the question is that Standing Order number 42-9 be suspended to enable the Honorable Prime Minister to uninterruptedly introduce the Appropriation 2019-2020 Bill for second reading. I now put the question. As many as are of that opinion, say aye. Aye. As many as of a contrary opinion, say no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Leave is granted. Proceed, Honorable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move for the second reading of a bill shortly entitled the Appropriations 2019-2020. Mr. Speaker, it is always an honor and a pleasure for me to present this annual budget to this honorable House, and this year is no different. Of course, I must thank the good people of Micoud South for their continued support and guidance. I'm also grateful for the encouragement I receive almost daily from St. Lucians of all walks of life. From a personal perspective, the process of preparing the budget affords me the opportunity as the Minister for Finance to bring an acute focus to bear on where we are as a country. From the government's perspective, it allows us, the executive, to measure our accomplishments against the policies and programs espoused in our manifesto, and to see where we need to redouble our efforts. I'm certain that the members of Cabinet will give a good account of the progress made by the ministries under their charge during the course of the debate. I humbly submit, Mr. Speaker, that as we approach the end of the third year of this term, we have several achievements of which we can be all proud of. It is all too easy, Mr. Speaker, to become distracted by numbers and statistics or by global developments, and to lose sight of the everyday experience of the average St. Lucian. But that, Mr. Speaker, is why we are here, is why the people of St. Lucia elected us, to represent their interest and to make their everyday lives more comfortable. Let there be no doubt, Mr. Speaker, this remains the singular purpose of my government. On this occasion, Mr. Speaker, I think it is important for me to have a conversation with the country on the way forward for St. Lucia. How what we do will make a difference for every St. Lucian, and what is required to get us there. To put things in context, Mr. Speaker, there are many areas where we tick all the right boxes, both as a government and as a country. The economy continues to grow. It has grown by 8% since we took office. Our debt to GDP is coming down. Although it's still a bit above the prudential benchmark, the debt to GDP ratio has fallen from 67.7% in 2015 to 64.9% in 2018. Stayover visitors have increased from 344,000 in 2015 to 394,000 in 2018. Cruise visitors continue to break records and has increased from 677,000 in 2015 to 760,000 in 2018. Investors continue to want to finance tourism development. There's a primary surplus. The fiscal deficit is within manageable limits. The unemployment has fallen from 24.1% in 2015 to 20.2% in 2018. Despite all these positives, Mr. Speaker, St. Lucia has been lagging behind our ECCU neighbors in what the experts call quality of life indices. Unemployment, especially among young people, is still too high. Poverty is still too widespread. Education is not meeting the needs of our students or businesses. Healthcare is inadequate, and crime continues to rise. This is the experience of the average St. Lucian, Mr. Speaker. We cannot run away from it. This government will not run away from it, Mr. Speaker. We're going to continue to meet it head on. What is required is our continued commitment and perseverance. If we don't continue on this path, we'll be doomed to a cycle of wash, rinse, repeat for another 20 years if we don't act now. This is the premise in which this year's budget is grounded, Mr. Speaker. The need to break from the stagnation and focus on the things that are going to turn lives in the country around. The urgent need, Mr. Speaker, to unlock the opportunities that will propel every St. Lucian to an acceptable standard of living and offer the chance to build wealth for themselves and their families. This is our singular focus, Mr. Speaker. We're all going to have to get used to doing things differently if we are going to hit our targets and make a difference in people's lives. The people of St. Lucia demand this, and they deserve no less. Mr. Speaker, even the most partisan member of our society will admit that on coming into office in mid-2016, this government inherited a country with significant economic and social challenges, which strangled the growth. We quickly understood that we had to take time, take immediate steps to bring our infrastructure into the 21st century and to modernize the administration of the country, if we're going to provide the opportunities that our people demand of us and which we promise to deliver. We have started, Mr. Speaker, but the pace is about to quicken. Equally important, Mr. Speaker, we had to take measures to improve the finances of the country so as to restore confidence in the economy and give the government the additional fiscal space required to implement many of the programs I will announce today. Even before coming to office, we realized that our debt profile presented a real risk to St. Lucia. Too much of our debt was in short-term treasury bills, which exposed the country to the specter of default in the event of an external shock. Over the last 2.5 years, therefore, we've made concerted effort to convert our short-term debt to longer-term bonds to reduce refinancing risk. Whereas much of the planned intervention will require an increase in the debt stock, my government is mindful of this, and new revenue streams have been established to service these debt arrangements. The strategy is working, and I will go into greater detail on this later in my presentation. But I believe it is important that this House and the country have an appreciation of the foundation that was being built to allow us to change gears and to take the next step, that of people-centered growth. With this in mind, the government has been engaged in restructuring the economy, putting us on a path to growth, and has developed a medium-term development plan for the period 2019 to 2022. This plan identifies 6 key areas to achieve sustainable and inclusive growth by 2022. The goals of the 6 key areas are as follows: healthcare, affordable access to quality healthcare; education, enrollment of 7,500 students in public post-secondary or tertiary education and TVET programs; citizen safety, a 45% reduction in serious crimes; tourism, a 40% increase in tourist arrivals; agriculture, increasing exports in bananas and cocoa; infrastructure, 99-kilometer roads, double airlift capacity, 40% increase in cruise capacity. I will identify in greater detail some of the game changers in the 6 strategic areas outlined as I proceed. But I wanted to draw to the attention of this Honorable House and to the country that this budget is about much more than debt management, fiscal strategy, and tax reform. It is about building a culture of delivery to implement the social and economic platforms critical for robust growth that will provide a fair share for every solution and take us to a different level. The medium-term development plan is designed to provide opportunities for our young people to be in a better position to find jobs, own their own homes, and to give them a future as productive citizens in their country. It will give farmers the ability to earn more to support their families. It will provide more jobs in the construction and tourism industries. It will ensure that every St. Lucian has access to affordable, quality healthcare, and to make travel into and around our country safer and more comfortable. This is what my government is committed to, Mr. Speaker, and that is what this budget will address. I turn briefly, Mr. Speaker, to the international economy. I'm not going to burden members with a slew of figures that is easily available everywhere elsewhere. Suffice it to say, the global economic growth weakened slightly in 2018. despite an acceleration of growth in the United States. Some commentators are predicting that the start of a cyclical downturn, but risk of an outright global recession in 2019 appear to be low. According to the latest IMF World Economic Outlook report of April 2019, one thing seems certain. The global economy is estimated to slow to 3.3% in 2019 from 3.6% in 2018. We note with interest the increasing trade tensions between the United States and China, and we are aware of the possible fallout that this could have on global trade. The world seems to be retreating from globalization as nationalism takes a deeper hold in the US and across Europe. Brexit remains an unresolved crisis, with few commentators able to reach a consensus on the long-term effects it will have on the global economy. Uncertainty in the economies of our source markets for our tourism and investment could pose a threat to us, and we're watching these developments closely. It is therefore even more critical that we position ourselves to accelerate growth in order to mitigate any external shocks that any of these issues could give rise to. Mr. Speaker, growth was positive across the region in 2018. For instance, Grenada recorded growth of 4.8%, and only Anguilla and Barbados recorded negative growth. The experience of our Caribbean neighbors is instructive for us here in St. Lucia. Mr. Speaker, because it allows us to avoid some of the pitfalls that can hamper economic expansion and gives us real-time examples of strategies that can benefit St. Lucia. Taking the example of Grenada, Mr. Speaker, despite recording an estimated 4.8%, their unemployment rate only fell by 2.7% to close to 20.9% last year. Here at home, despite a slower than anticipated rate of growth, unemployment is averaging 20.2% for the year so far, but fell in the last quarter of 2018 by 7% to 16.2 compared to 23.2 in the last quarter of 2017. Clearly, Mr. Speaker, our focus must be on growth that provides sustainable jobs, and I repeat, this is one of the main aims of this budget. On the positive side, we have noted the benefits of strong fiscal management on Grenada's growth path, as well as the vigorous program being undertaken by Barbados to restructure the debt and curb expenditure to stabilize their fiscal position. Across the ECCU, adverse weather continues to pose a threat to our agriculture, and in extreme cases, such as Dominica, can grind economic activity to a perilous halt. It is therefore critical that we continue to build resilience in our infrastructure and among our people. I will now examine our performance over the last budget year. Domestic economic performance and prospects, Mr. Speaker, St. Lucia has been on a consistent path of economic expansion, recording positive consecutive real growth rates since 2016. Even though there was less construction activity, positive growth was recorded in most other sectors in 2018. Tourism arrivals across all categories grew by an average of 10.2% to register a new record, over 1.2 million visitors in 2018. Cruise arrivals set a new record, growing by 13.6% to over 760,000. Similarly, stayover arrivals continued to trend upward, increasing by 2.2% to almost 395,000, the highest to date. This was due to the favorable economic conditions in source markets, expanded airlift, and the enhanced marketing efforts. Yacht arrivals also increased by 26.7% in 2018. And despite the damage caused by Tropical Storm Kurt in September, the agriculture sector showed signs of recovery, with expansions recorded in all subsectors with the exception of fisheries. Banana exports grew by 3.2% to almost 14,000 tons, and export revenue increased by 1.9 million to 20.3 million in 2018. The livestock subsector is estimated to have expanded, with egg production rising by 30.7% to a peak of 1.7 million dozen, while chicken and pork production together increased by 0.8% in 2018. I've taken time to go into some of the detail, Mr. Speaker, to demonstrate that contrary to the government's critics, there's been more improvements in economic activity that positively affect the lives of thousands of St. Lucians. What this budget proposes to do is to expand the reach and impact of growth in the economy for the benefit of every St. Lucian. A fair share for all, Mr. Speaker. On the fiscal side, there was an improved performance driven by higher revenue of 6.4%. Receipts from the CIP were significantly higher at 66.4 million, compared to 27.8 million the year before. This led to a larger primary surplus, up from 52.3 million to 101.5 million, and a lower overall deficit, down to 69.7 million from 110.1 million the year before. Our public debt to GDP declined to 64.9% in 2018, from 65.2% in 2017. In the financial sector, commercial bank profitability improved in 2018. I note with interest the positive performance of the ECFH, which has posted 2 consecutive years of profits. Bank lending continued to contract while deposits expanded further, leading to increased liquidity in the banking system. Non-performing loans continued to trend downward to 10% at the end of 2018. In the non-bank financial sector, credit union and loan stocks expanded further, while the insurance sector experienced increased activity. Mr. Speaker, the short to medium term economic prospects for the domestic economy are positive. St. Lucia is poised to experience expansion with a projected upturn in 2019 and 2020. Growth will be driven by robust construction activity in the public and private sectors. Government's major infrastructure investments in this fiscal year include the following. The HIA rehabilitation project has started with designs and related geotechnical surveys at the advanced stage. The project is expected to take 30 months from the groundbreaking to completion and is expected to cost US $175 million. The Taiwanese-funded road development program, amounting to US $42 million over 36 months, is about to commence on strategic roads island-wide, including roads that will link farmers and rural communities with the rest of the island. In addition, road rehabilitation projects are in train for the West Coast Road and the Millennium Highway, where the consultant has been appointed and designs are well advanced. Both of these roads are funded by the UK Caribbean Infrastructure Fund grants amounting to approximately US $43 million. Site preparation has started in the anticipation of the construction of the new wing of the St. Jude Hospital, as well as rehabilitation and improvement in the existing structures. The estimated cost of works is $30 million US. Construction works will accelerate on the John Compton Dam, Dennery Water Supply Redevelopment Phase 2, the View Fort Water Supply Redevelopment, and all in this fiscal year. The Castries Market Redevelopment Project is expected to commence during this fiscal year and will be undertaken on a phased basis. A temporary site has already been identified for the relocation of the vendors. Port development is expected in the medium term in both Castries and in View Fort Port. Preliminary discussions are ongoing with international partners. Construction of the Cul De Sac Bridge, which has undergone some project redesign, as no tenders were received that fell within the grant budget provided by the government of Japan. The bridge will be built, but the government of St. Lucia will provide the funding for ancillary works to the bridge. It is also anticipated that in the private sector, At least 7 major hotel projects are expected to commence during the fiscal year. The environment impact assessment for the resort and residences at the Honeymoon Beach and Canals is 95% complete, and the developer hopes to break ground shortly. The project will be constructed in 3 phases. Phase 1 and Phase 2 will be the construction of a hotel and residences, which will be financed by the developer. And Phase 3, which is a CIP-approved project, will be the construction of villas. The hotel in Choiseul has been taken over by a new investor and will no longer be a Fairmont-branded property. There have been minimal changes to the design, the financing has been secured, and the construction is expected to commence in the 4th quarter of this year. With the Sandals project, we're awaiting the outcome of a legal matter, and once this is resolved, the 360-suite project at a cost of US $200 million will get underway. A 400-room hotel is earmarked for Shock, with plans well underway. A 150-room Courtyard Marriott at Point Seraphim. We will announce very shortly a major hotel golf course in Cap Estate. The development of the DSH project continues with our first race schedule for National Day this year. The horse racing track is being enhanced with 2 boutique hotels, along with a polar and equestrian field. The second phase of the track is to include apartments, offices, and commercial space, is due to commence later this year. These projects will provide hundreds of jobs during the construction phase, and further employment once the properties are complete and open. Mr. Speaker, in addition to the heightened activity in the construction sector, growth will be supported by an expansion in the tourism sector, which is expected to continue in 2019 with projected increases in arrivals, for stayovers, and for cruise visitors. I should point out that after the recent devastating hurricanes that affected hotel operations in several regional destinations, the situation is now normalizing, and growth is therefore not expected to be quite as robust. The situation therefore provides the impetus for us to double our marketing and airlift efforts. Enhancing implementation. Mr. Speaker, I've outlined where we are, Mr. Speaker, and where we anticipate growth is coming from in the fiscal year. What I now propose to outline in more detail is the way forward for various sectors. But first, I must explain how we propose to manage the implementation of our development strategy. We recognize that the implementation has not kept pace with policy, and this has led to disappointment in various segments of our society. This problem has become as frustrating for us as it is for many solutions. To this end, Mr. Speaker, we have established a Performance Management Delivery Unit, PDMU, comprised of skilled professionals from a variety of backgrounds with a mix of experience in both public and private sectors to manage implementation of the medium-term development plan. The core activity of the PDMU is to provide support and challenge the sectors in delivery planning to ensure plans are sound, comprehensive, and specific. For example, detailing milestones, responsibilities, and timelines. Provide performance insights through monitoring and reporting on the delivery of top priorities, both through data analysis and regular fieldwork to validate the data. Solve implementation problems in key priority areas, working closely with leaders from across the sectors, building capacity in delivery across the public service through better planning, implementation, and knowledge sharing. Coordinate across the sectors to ensure effective resource utilization and timely responses to implementation challenges. I also want to make it clear, Mr. Speaker, that once the Performance Management and Delivery Unit is fully staffed and functioning, the relevant cabinet ministers and their respective teams will ultimately be responsible for delivery of the goals under the 6 strategic development areas. That brings me, Mr. Speaker, to the 6 key result areas, of which I spoke earlier. Health sector strategy. The health sector has been a challenge for some time now, Mr. Speaker, but one which we are determined to solve. I appreciate that it's taken longer than desirable, but we are committed to getting it right so that every St. Lucian has access to quality health care. During the coming financial year, the government will invest $162 million in the health of St. Lucians at all levels. While it is easy to focus on the OKEU and St. Jude's hospitals, a lot of work has been going on behind the scenes to ensure that the clinical and non-clinical service standards move towards meeting international standards and the sector best practices through consultation with the Pan-American Health Organization, the World Health Organization, and the Caribbean Medical Labs Foundation. To achieve the strategic health outcomes over the medium to long term, the Department of Health and Wellness shall pursue the following health sector drivers during this financial period. 1. Design and implementation of a national health insurance. 2. Strengthening of primary and public health. 2. Ensure every child gets their full vaccines. Increase the effectiveness of our prevention of NCDs. Increase our attack on mosquito-borne diseases. Strengthen the quality of primary wellness centers and medical centers. Implementation of a quality assurance framework through the adoption of ISO 9001, 2015, the International Standard for Quality Management Systems. 4. Full commissioning of the national hospitals in the new locations. National health insurance to secure affordable access to health care services. A national health fund will be established with the sole purpose of funding the national health care insurance. I wish to point out that the government will ensure that adequate provisions will be made to cover the poor and most vulnerable within our society. Cognizant of the necessary legislative and institutional changes required to facilitate the full establishment of the National Health Insurance Scheme, the Department of Health and Wellness shall implement a pilot NHI while undertaking the necessary changes to support the system concurrently. A National Health Insurance Committee has been set up to present the best model and financing options to the Cabinet. Mr. Speaker, all options will be examined, including general tax revenues, donors, and increase the contributions to arrive at the appropriate mix that will ensure affordability, choice, and full participation of all St. Lucians. In the coming months, we will earmark upon a broad-based consultation with all stakeholders. The full commissioning of OKEU Hospital continues to be a top priority of my government. Along with the dialysis and physiotherapy units, all outpatient services, with the exception of oncology clinic, have been transferred to the OKEU Hospital. It is therefore expected that the transitioning will continue into the first quarter of this budget year, with the full commissioning of the laboratory and imaging services, which has already commenced, to be followed by the full transition of all inpatient services. Plans for the physical relocation of all staff, equipment, and services from the Victoria Hospital are well advanced. Cognizant of the shortfall in beds, the Mental Wellness Center will be reconfigured to facilitate the addition of another 40 beds. The Victoria Hospital, as we all know, is an aged plant with many structural issues. The decommissioning of the Victoria Hospital will mean that services such as the Q&I health program, the sexually transmitted infection clinic, and the oncology unit are all to be relocated to enable the sanitization of the premise for the prevention of disease transmissions. The Q&I health program will be relocated to the old Turning Point facility at an estimated cost of $1.45 million. The oncology unit will be relocated to the National Mental Wellness Center at an estimated cost of $1.2 million. The sexually transmitted infection clinic will be relocated to the Castries Wellness Center at an estimated cost of $2.3 million. Mr. Speaker, the subject of the St. Jude Hospital has been a hotly debated topic in the Honorable House, and for good reason. There's been understandable dissatisfaction over the fact that almost 10 years after the fire in 2009, and the significant sums provided by private individuals, friendly governments, and the central government, the people of St. Lucia still do not have a functioning hospital on the site. My government has been criticized for its approach to dealing with what we inherited under this project when we came into office in June 2016. However, any responsible government would have done precisely what we did. That is, undertake a review of what transpired on the project. On the basis of the findings, the technical audit completed in 2017, the project was suspended with a view to allowing us an opportunity to determine the most appropriate approach to completion and commissioning of the hospital. The technical audit highlighted significant deficiencies in the planning and the execution of the project, and that led to significant expenditure over and above the original project cost. Yet the project remained over 50% incomplete. Mr. Speaker, the St. Jude Hospital reconstruction project will deliver a 90-bed facility that will cater for both inpatient and outpatient services. The project will involve a construction of a new wing to incorporate all the functions and services of the existing east and surgical wings. It will comprise interconnected two-story structures to be erected on the left-hand side of the entrance of the existing site. Integration through retrofitting of some existing buildings to achieve a fully functioning hospital to match the services of a 11-4 facility, and revision of the internal layout of the buildings to be integrated for functional efficiency and compliance to minimum standards. Mr. Speaker, the project is expected to have a duration of 18 months. Funding for the project will come from the US $10 million, which is undispersed balance on the existing $20 million loan from the Republic of China, Taiwan, which was agreed in 2014, and an additional amount of $20 million US, which has been approved with the same creditor. Mr. Speaker, my government wishes to place on record its immense gratitude for the patience and the understanding of the management and the staff of St. Jude Hospital, as well as the sportsmen and women of this country who've had to endure such a long period of utilization of the stadium for a purpose for which it was not created. Mr. Speaker, primary health care across the country is undergoing a major overhaul, including more resources for better management of education about non-communicable diseases, which present a clear danger to many solutions. To this end, a wellness center will be constructed in Miku through funding provided by the World Bank of US $1.2 million. Again, with funding provided by the World Bank of over $4.5 million, the people of Dennery will have a brand new polyclinic. A new hospital will serve the people of Soufrière, Canneries, Fonsejac, and Choiseul. The cost is to be determined subject to the finalization of the design. These three facilities will relieve the pressure on the national hospitals and provide health care to our various communities. Mr. Speaker, I want to put to rest forever the propaganda that the United Workers' Party does not care about the people. We are not stopping there, Mr. Speaker. Through the assistance of the Pan-American Health Organization and provided by the United Kingdom Department for International Development, $8.4 million will now be spent on 17 health centers that will be upgraded as part of the SMART project to make them, one, safe and operational both during and after extreme weather events and emergencies. Two, climate resilient so that they are adapted for changing weather patterns. Three, sustainable and energy efficient with lowered carbon footprints and operational cost. They include Comfort Bay Senior Citizens Home, Leclerc Wellness Center, Vieux-Fort Wellness Center, the Transit Home in Dereseau, Bellevue and Monrepos, Saltebus, Montrouge, Lafargue Wellness Center, Bexar, Labrie, and Richfort Wellness Centers, Marchy, Entrepot, Tirocher, and Castries Wellness Center. Mr. Speaker, I don't think I'm betraying any state secrets by admitting that over the years, our education system has become unresponsive to our national development goals and the personal ambitions of our students. This is not a condition that began yesterday or in 2016, but it is a situation on which we must act now if we are to move our nation forward with confidence, and if our young people are to fulfill their dreams while becoming productive builders of our society. The course of action which we have started and are about to accelerate will revolutionize both teaching and learning in St. Lucia, in both the short term and in the long term. It will touch every age group across a range of academic and vocational disciplines and take St. Lucia to the next level. In this regard, we will advance efforts to modernize our school curriculum and teaching methods so that we can raise pass rates and provide our young people with the skills that will enable them to find rewarding and productive work. This is the main aim of our education strategy. What it means is we are going to improve the quality of our technical education and that we're going to improve the quality of our school education. The centers of excellence in sport and the arts and culture will provide non-traditional but important avenues for students to realize their full potential whilst receiving sound secondary level education. Mr. Speaker, it is critical that we improve the quality of education we provide to our students if they are to lead productive, fulfilling adult lives. The pass rates for some subjects at the CSEC level are unacceptably low. The Ministry of Education will continue to provide professional development training for teachers so they are better able to deliver high-quality instruction. Our aim is to increase the number of students who qualify for university education. Coupled with this, an academic and social support program for the students enrolled in Sir Arthur Lewis Community College, aimed at reducing the number of dropouts. I'm especially pleased that the money has been provided in the budget for the SCORE program to keep extra support to students in specific subjects, help carry them over the line. The program will be inaugurated during summer of school this year, Mr. Speaker. I'm pleased to announce that an additional $10 million has been allocated in the budget for the rebuilding and refurbishment program during the coming fiscal year. In addition, the ICT integration project, Smart Schools, will receive $2.5 million towards its digital literacy curriculum. This is a vital component of 21st century learning and teaching. Mr. Speaker, technology provides teachers with access to a wide new range of teaching tools and methods. Students, for the most part, already familiar with smart devices, will have a learning channel more in touch with their everyday experience and be better equipped for present-day jobs. My government will invest $20.6 million in sporting facilities and programs across the country during this financial year. These facilities will ensure our youth channel their energy into positive, healthy activity. I've said it before, and it bears repeating now, that it's better for our young people to join clubs than to join gangs. 4 sports facilities have been identified initially for further development as follows: a mini stadium at Soufrière, a large sports hub at Dennery, a medium sports hub in Micoud North, and a community hub in Micoud South. In addition, we'll soon have the School of Excellence at Gros-Islet, where a pilot program has already begun, which introduced to Form 3 as a first step of phasing in the sports curriculum. Our emphasis on sports serves as dual purpose, Mr. Speaker. From a social perspective, it gets youth engaged in healthy activity and off the streets after school, while building community spirit. From a development standpoint, it provides them with training that could lead to university scholarships abroad and careers as professional athletes. It'll be money well spent, providing significant social dividends. The government's plans to merge the National Lottery into the Gaming Authority to handle the regulatory aspects of the lottery also fits into this vision. What this means is we will now establish a new youth and sports authority with the expertise to be able to invest in sports and cultural development. It will be specifically staffed for this purpose and be able to fund major sporting activities in St. Lucia. With this investment by the government, I'm making a formal plea for St. Lucians to engage in the spirit of volunteerism. And I'm calling on all volunteer coaches and trainers to give their time and knowledge to maximize both the investment and the talent of our young people. Permit me, Mr. Speaker, at this juncture, to mention plans for the further development of our music industry. We've seen much success with our local artists exploring different types of music, especially as it relates to soca, as in the case of Teddyson John and Ricky T, and many others. And of course, in the case of the Dennery segment artists. I'm happy to report plans for the establishment of a recording studio in the community of Dennery and the advancement of plans for the establishment of a recording studio at the Morn. Of course, our lineup of summer festivals and new structure also now affords our local artists more opportunities to deliver top-notch performances. As a government, we are committed to the development of not just music, but to the creative arts. Citizen safety is a key area earmarked for urgent attention in the medium-term development plan. As everyone within earshot of my voice will appreciate, however much we improve the lives of our people, if we do not feel secure in our homes or safe in going about our day-to-day business, it will be for nothing. In addition, rising crime can undermine our tourism industry, with visitors simply choosing other destinations where they feel safe. Citizen safety will see 12 game changes in 3 focus areas, with the goal of a 45% reduction in serious crime by the end of the strategy term in 2022, and a 30% reduction in repeat offending by the same year. This radical and long overdue approach, Mr. Speaker, will focus on better policing, greater efficiency in the legal system, the rehabilitation of offenders, and the strengthening of the justice system. Crime prevention and detection will benefit from a stronger police presence in hotspots. We'll be increasing foot and mobile patrols, the front line where they are needed most. Mr. Speaker, greater surveillance capabilities are now available to the police, with the building out of a $5.8 million Safe City CCT project in Castries, of which $1.8 million has been allocated for 2019-2020. In addition, greater focus will be placed on community policing to strengthen the community involvement in fighting crime. Investigation and prosecution are an integral part of reducing crime. The Forensic Lab is already working through the backlog of cases needed to provide the evidence in pending criminal cases. Similarly, the reopening of the Naraya Criminal Court has resulted in 25% of all cases being cleared, with the target of 70% of backlog cases being cleared by the year end. Mr. Speaker, My government does not believe that incarceration is the only solution to reducing crime in St. Lucia. Rehabilitation will be a key component in crime reduction aimed at preventing reoffending upon discharge. Inmates at the Border Lake Correctional Facility and juveniles at the Boys Training Center will be offered enhanced life skills, literacy and numeracy schooling, substance abuse counseling, and CVQ certification programs to give offenders the skills to re-enter society with better options for employment, thereby reducing the lure of criminal activity. In addition, Mr. Speaker, the introduction of a parole system early in this financial year is intended to support discharged inmates in transitioning back into the community to give them a better chance at completing their rehabilitation. A parole system has been promised for several years now, and I do not believe I have to convince honorable members of the social benefits of its introduction. Alongside a strong rehabilitation program, we view this as a huge step forward in building a better St. Lucia. Mr. Speaker, my government has demonstrated its commitment to justice and the courts through its continued upgrade and upkeep of the courthouses and legal infrastructure in St. Lucia. This administration has spent more on the renovation of court infrastructure and facilities than any other administration. My government has renovated a number of courthouses to make these more comfortable for all users whilst we await the construction of a permanent home for the courts. In addition, improvements to the court infrastructure, we have further strengthened the human resources of the offices of the Director of Public Prosecution and the Attorney General's chambers. An additional Crown Counsel, as well as a process server, has been added to the DPP's office. Also, additional legislative drafters have been added to the legislative drafting unit, and this unit is now fully staffed. A full component of legislative drafters will ensure our legislation is drafted within reasonable time, thereby bolstering our implementation efforts. Also, the advice and the litigation unit has received an additional litigator, which will also strengthen our implementation and execution efforts. Mr. Speaker, the medium-term development plan identifies 3 economic sectors where focused action will yield the greatest results: tourism, infrastructure, and agriculture. As a key economic pillar for the future growth, considerable attention has been paid to the tourism strategy. Some 20 game changers have been developed to accelerate growth in both tourist arrivals and tourist receipts. The aim is to increase stayover tourists from 386 arrivals in 2017 to 541,000 by 2022. For this to be successful in attracting more visitors, Mr. Speaker, we must repivot the tourism industry in St. Lucia. We can do this by creating a unique St. Lucian experience that appeals to travelers seeking an authentic holiday, whether that is in adventure tourism, ecotourism, heritage tourism, or wellness tourism. We must evolve our product beyond the package-based offerings, now reasonably well covered in our market. Part of our new approach is formal agreements with sharing economy providers like Airbnb. This relatively new market segment is proving to be more lucrative than the traditional accommodation, since spend is on island and touches a wide supply base of goods and services. This is not to say that we will be abandoning or minimizing our effort to secure investment in new hotels or the expansion of existing properties, but we must cover all bases in changing the marketplace. 10 of the 11 game changers in the first focus area, unlocking high-impact tourism projects, are fully private sector driven, with government funding the redevelopment of the Castries Central Market and the wider beautification of Castries as part of the OECS Regional Tourism Competitiveness Project. This project, Mr. Speaker, will transform both the visitor and local shopping experience in Castries. But beyond this, Mr. Speaker, it will benefit the owners of micro-enterprises and encourage further investment in this sector. As the cruise tourism sector market continues to expand, the government has identified the Castries City tourism product as a priority for St. Lucia, and with targeted investments in sites and activities aimed at making downtown Castries more pleasant and attractive to tourists, as well to St. Lucians. The consultancy and design phases for several investment initiatives to revitalize downtown Castries has started. These initiatives include the pedestrianization of William Peter Boulevard, the upgrading of sidewalks, works for the improvement of the visitor experience, walking through downtown Castries and the boulevard areas, the beautification of King George V Park, including the botanical gardens, improvement to the traffic and parking, and a facade improvement and grants program for existing small businesses. The other focus area, diversification of product offerings, will see the further development of spa and wellness tourism and ecotourism with 8 new or expanded private sector offerings. In addition to the preparatory legislative and regulatory framework for village tourism is well advanced, and Gros Islet, Anse-Lorraine, and Soufrière are to be the first beneficiaries of this exciting new tourism product. The global brand of this initiative will be Village Tourism, but each village will have its own unique signature reflecting the natural and cultural assets of the area. Each community will substantially own and manage their initiative to bring economic benefits to as wide number of residents as possible. If I can pause for a moment, Mr. Speaker, and talk about the recently opened Honeymoon Beach. Honeymoon Beach is not about only improving the developments, Hummingbird Beach, sorry, improving the developments for the Soufrières themselves, who have been deprived for years of being able to go to their beaches with proper washroom facilities. But most importantly, is the young Soufrières from Barons Drive, who every day come up to Castries to bring tourists back to where? To the Anne-Chassenay Beach and the Sugar Beach, of which the local Soufrières have not benefited from that independent dollar. Now, by having world-class facilities that can compete against Sugar Beach and compete against the Anne-Chassenay Beach, these same young men can now bring tourists to Hummingbird Beach during the day and bring much-needed tourism dollars and change the face of tourism in Soufrière forever. Opportunities abound in mid-range accommodation, restaurants and bars, locally made craft products, cultural activities, homemade jams, juices and condiments, fresh fruits, vegetables, medicinal herbs, hiking and water sports activities. As ordinary as these things may seem to us, Mr. Speaker, these are the things that can unlock the affluent market looking for an authentic St. Lucian experience and put ching, ching, ching in the pockets of the people of St. Lucia. Village tourism will allow interested persons to become participants in the value chain of tourism and improve their social outcomes. This, Mr. Speaker, is an example of empowering the St. Lucians and has the potential to revolutionize wealth creation, previously marginalized segments of our society. The key economic targets of tourism sector strategy are to increase the GDP contributions to $1.9 billion in 2022, attract investments of $3.5 billion by 2022, and create over 4,000 jobs by 2022. We can do it, Mr. Speaker. We have the ability, the creativity, and the capacity. We just have to remain focused on the task. We want tourism to represent an opportunity for the average man. We will not just create income for the country, but more commercial opportunities for all St. Lucians. Mr. Speaker, since the start of the Banana Productivity Improvement Project in April of 2017, acreage under the banana cultivation has increased by 134% to just over 2,600 acres. The number of farmers has grown from 286 to 740. At this juncture, Mr. Speaker, I must thank the Republic of China, Taiwan, for their continued support of the St. Lucian banana farmers and agriculture as a whole. They've provided much needed funding and technical assistance, benefiting hundreds of banana farmers. Similarly, a program is being developed to expand cocoa production in order to increase cocoa exports and provide another source of income for farmers. In terms of food production, there are opportunities for high-yield, high-value crops and non-traditional technologies like aquaponics and hydroponics, development of agro-processing in plantains, coconut water, and increased meat, poultry, and egg production to meet the expected demand of the growing tourism sector. Mr. Speaker, I am sure members in this Honorable House will recall I announced the need to restructure the St. Lucia Marketing Board and the St. Lucia Fish Marketing Corporation. I can report here today that the St. Lucia Marketing Board is being restructured, and we're confident that the restructured entity will provide the much needed support for our farmers, as plans include the strengthening the supply of the distribution chain linkages to provide farmers, intermediary, and consumer to the consumers and greater confidence in the sector. In respect of the fishery sector, we're working to strengthen the capacity and the productivity of the fisher folk and to help them identify new market opportunities. Infrastructure development, Mr. Speaker. The argument for infrastructural development is not a difficult one to make. 9 out of the 10 solutions could probably provide a priority list that closely mirrors the consensus arrived by all of us today. The roads and air and seaports face 3 common issues: poor physical condition, limited capacity, and poor connectivity that makes the country highly vulnerable to the event of extreme weather conditions. The goal is therefore to enhance St. Lucia's infrastructure to support economic activity in tourism, agriculture, retail, and trade. There are 6 areas of priority which has been identified for infrastructure. Mainly, 1, the rehabilitation of the Millennium Highway and West Coast Road. 2, the reconstruction and rehabilitation of the secondary roads and collector roads. 3, the development of cargo and container facility in Cul De Sac. 4, upgrade of the amenities and facilities for cruise at Port Castries. 5, the development of a Viewfort cruise port. 6, redevelopment and expansion of the Huronora International Airport to handle 1 million passengers by 2022. However, within the coming financial year, we'll be focusing on the following 3 areas: rehabilitation of the Millennium Highway and West Coast Road, reconstruction and rehabilitation of secondary roads and collector roads, and 3, the redevelopment and expansion of the Huronora International Airport to handle 1 million passengers by 2022. The remaining areas are still within the preliminary and conceptualization phases and will be rolled out in the very near future. Local government reforms, in recognition of the need for further empowerment of our people and give them a greater say in the management and the development of their own communities, Mr. Speaker, my government continues to prepare and provide resources to local government to enable them to undertake increased responsibility at that community level in the management and the maintenance of government assets, such as playing fields and the secondary road network. In addition, Mr. Speaker, our local government entities will be strengthened and trained to dispense and manage a range of government social services at the community and district levels. In that regard, resources have been allocated to the Department of Equity to undertake a full assessment of the local government system and to come up with a reform program for the implementation during this financial year. Underpinning the medium-term development plan of 2019 and 2022 growth agenda that is expected to deliver accelerated growth rates over the medium term. This growth will be inclusive, sustainable, and resilient. It will provide every solution with a fair chance at success, no matter what the circumstances of their birth. In order to enable our growth agenda, there is a simultaneous requirement to boost national productivity and improve our competitiveness. Government will therefore establish a framework for monitoring, measuring, and reporting on the country's efforts in enhancing its competitiveness. This will be done in partnership with the Compete Caribbean Partnership Facility through the formulation of a national competitiveness agenda, which will identify appropriate structural reforms and actions that must be taken at the national level to boost productivity and competitiveness. As part of the agenda, Compete Caribbean will also assist in the formulation of innovation policy that will complement the decade of research and innovation by the Ministry of Education, Innovation, Gender Relations, and Sustainable Development. Mr. Speaker, it's well accepted fact that economic growth and fiscal performance reinforces each other. The government believes that the first step in sustainable fiscal path is a sound growth platform. It is in this spirit, Mr. Speaker, that dedicated revenue streams have been allocated to fund both road and port infrastructure of the government. Both of these investments, Mr. Speaker, facilitate higher growth, which in turn allows for greater revenue generation. Mr. Speaker, to ensuring fiscal stability without securing a higher growth path would have doomed our people to a perpetual cycle of austerity. I see all this, Mr. Speaker, to show the importance of economic growth to my government. Equally, Mr. Speaker, we also believe that fiscal responsibility should be guided by set parameters of rules that link expenditure to growth. During the coming fiscal year, the government will engage in stakeholder consultation on what this and any future government will be allowed to spend annually, depending on the percentage of debt to GDP. Such an approach, made binding by the appropriate legislation, will ensure that St. Lucia stays on a fiscally sustainable path and that future generations will not have to pay for the excesses of indiscipline of a former administration. This is but one approach to ensure that we maintain fiscal fitness, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I turn now to the fiscal policy of the government during this budget year. The policy changes that I'm about to announce, Mr. Speaker, are motivated by our desire to improve the efficiency in the collection of revenues of our revenue agencies and to secure the effectiveness of our expenditure. Mr. Speaker, we seek to ensure that expenditure is strategically allocated while tax policy is conducive to enhancing and facilitating growth. On that note, Mr. Speaker, one of the most significant contributors to the economic growth in St. Lucia is the tourism industry. This industry accounts for 15% of our labor force and earns significant foreign exchange. Each year, Mr. Speaker, the government of St. Lucia allocates approximately $30 to $35 million to various agencies to promote and market St. Lucia. To put this in context, Mr. Speaker, in any given 5-year term, the administration can easily borrow $175 million for marketing and promoting our destination. This allocation, Mr. Speaker, is often the result of bond financing and is therefore borrowed. The borrowing not only increases our debt levels, but the resulting cost of servicing the debt increases our interest payments and thereby further limits our fiscal space. This is and has been the practice for some time, and has been motivated by the mindset that the funds borrowed bring awareness to our destination and therefore continue the upward trajectory in arrivals. And Mr. Speaker, to a large extent, this is true and does facilitate enhanced levels of economic activity. However, the efficiency of this expenditure is tempered by the fact that the disbursement of these funds is subject to the vagaries of the budgeting process, and as such are allocated quarterly. These quarterly allocations, Mr. Speaker, limit the range of activities which the Tourism Authority can facilitate and consequently limit the efficiency of this expenditure. As in other areas of the economy, Mr. Speaker, it is the intention of the government to disperse taxes or fees raised in the sector directly to that sector. In the case of Tourism Authority, it will provide a ready and continuous source of funding throughout the year for marketing and promotion. The government is currently in consultation with the industry about instituting an accommodation fee to be used for marketing of the island. Once the consultation is complete, an announcement will be made on how the fee will be applied. It is expected to be progressive fee based on the classification of accommodation properties and will include sharing economy providers like Airbnb. Mr. Speaker, tourism destinations all around the world, including some right here in the Caribbean, have identified the sharing economy as a missed revenue opportunities and are working with technology facilitators like Airbnb to capture this sector's fair share of taxation. We are pursuing our own arrangement with Airbnb so that those who benefit from the sharing economy contribute to the development of our tourism product. Mr. Speaker, I now move to the personal income tax regime. The current personal income tax system presents a number of challenges due to the existing structure of the regime. The regime is characterized by one personal allowance of $18,000, 4 tax bands, 4 tax rates, and 28 allowances and deductions, the highest in the ECCU countries. The large number of allowances and deductions, whilst enjoyed by some, present significant challenges in the administration of the personal income tax. The major disadvantages in the current system are less than ideal filing experience for the tax-paying public, as many persons find the process burdensome due to the number of documents which must be obtained and submitted, and in order to substantiate the deductions and allowances claimed. Many individuals find the tax computation complicated with the 4 tax bands and 4 tax rates. The system is not sufficiently progressive, as the greatest burden of taxation does not always fall on the high income earners. These individuals are better able to make advantage of the numerous deductions and allowances, thereby reducing their tax liability. In addition, the challenges faced by taxpayers, the current system places a huge administrative burden on Inland Revenue Department. A significant amount of resources and time is spent by Inland Revenue Department in processing, assessing, and auditing personal income tax returns, diverting resources away from strategic focus required to enhance the department's efficiency in revenue collections and tax compliance. So, Mr. Speaker, my government recognizes there is a need to reform the personal income tax system and make it simpler, more progressive, and less burdensome, and the expectation is that tax compliance will be increased. With the overall objective of improving the efficiency of the tax system, the new regime seeks to provide income tax relief to lower income earners. A larger number of low-income employees will no longer be required to pay personal income tax, while others will benefit from the reduced tax liabilities. However, high-income earners will be expected to pay more as a result of the progressive nature of the tax system. As such, Mr. Speaker, the regime is expected to be revenue neutral, with no adverse impact on government's revenue collections from PAYE. My government, therefore, proposes a new personal income tax system to be made effective 1st of January 2020. This system will be as follows. The personal allowance will be increased from $18,000 to $23,000. What does this mean, Mr. Speaker? Is that the average income earner for the first $23,000 of annual income will be tax-free. There will be 3 tax bands with the following rate. The first 0 to 10,000 of the chargeable income will be taxed at a rate of 10%. The next 10,000 to 20,000 at a rate of 20%, and the remaining amounts above 20,000 at a tax rate of 30%, my apologies. Limit the amount of total deductions that can be claimed upon a maximum of $25 in any given 1 year, from the list of deductions below. Sorry? 25,000. Restrict the number of allowable deductions to the following 4 categories. Housing deductions for mortgage, interest, property tax, and house insurance. Future and financial benefits for life insurance, NIC contributions, pension plan contributions, savings under a registered retirement plan, and shares from cooperatives. Medical deductions for medical insurance premiums and other medical expenses. And 4, child education benefits for child allowance and student loan interest for university or equivalent education. Mr. Speaker, allow me to demonstrate how progressive this system will be with low earners as beneficiaries. As an example, with annual earnings of $26,000 and allowable deductions of $5,000, pays tax approximately of $300 currently. However, under the new regime, this employee will not pay any tax, resulting in a savings of $300 a year. An employee with an annual earnings of $50,000 and allowable deductions of $10,000 pays tax of approximately $2,900 under the existing regime. However, under the new regime, this employee will pay $2,400, which is a reduction of $500 in their annual taxable amount. An employee with an annual earnings of $118,000 and allowable deductions of $20,000 pays tax of approximately $19,500 under the existing regime. Under the new regime, this employee will pay the same amount, and in the case, therefore, there will be no tax savings. However, an employee with an annual earnings of $150,000 and allowable deductions of $40,000 currently pays tax of $23,100. Given the restriction in allowances under the new regime capped at $25,000, the reduction in the number of tax bands and the new tax rates, this payer will pay a tax amounting of $27,600, an increase of $4,500 that is paid under the current regime. It must be noted, Mr. Speaker, that pensioners and persons 60 years and over will not pay any tax on the first $31,000, and their income compared to $24,000 under the current regime. An assessment of the proposed reform, Mr. Speaker, showed that for a given year, over 11,000 persons of approximately 50% of filers will pay lower personal income taxes under the proposed regime. The greatest number of beneficiaries under this reform are individuals earning incomes ranging from $20,000 to $30,000 and $30,000 to $40,000. In these 2 income brackets, some 3,570 and 3,280 individuals will benefit. Mr. Speaker, my government anticipates significant tax savings for those majority of individuals who will be better off under the proposed tax regime. Mr. Speaker, Taxpayers with a high level of allowable deductions who benefit most from the current system will be negatively impacted with higher tax liabilities. However, it must be noted that they are in a minority. Overall, our people will benefit from this new tax regime, and it's anticipated that this will have a spillover effect on the economy as a whole as consumer spending power has and will increase. Mr. Speaker, you recall we instituted a moratorium on the payment of land and house tax, commonly known as property tax, for residential properties for a period of 3 years, from the calendar years 2017 to 2019. Mr. Speaker, the government is in the process of reviewing the property tax regime for these properties and to determine the most equitable and transparent way of basing and assessing properties for the purposes of taxation. During this calendar year, we will inform of the regime to be implemented effective January 2020, following the broad-based consultations with stakeholders. Mr. Speaker, in my 2 previous budget addresses, I outlined the government's policy on fuel taxation and prices. The decisions taken in this issue reflected attempts to strike the appropriate balance between objectives. 1, of achieving retail price stability to guard against retail prices above a certain level, and 2, the attainment of sufficient revenue towards funding the maintenance of our road network amidst volatile international prices. You'll recall that in my 2017-18 budget, I had announced the increase in excise tax on gasoline and fuel from $2.50 to $4, which took effect July 3rd, 2017 for this purpose. At the same time, the government capped the retail price of both gasoline and diesel at $12.75 per gallon. Mr. Speaker, subsequently, in light of rising international oil prices, the price cap of gasoline and diesel was increased to $13.95 in June of 2018. However, with oil prices continuing to increase, the targeted excise tax rate of $4 was not realized during much of the budget year of 2018-2019. The excise tax rates were below $4 during the first 8 months of 2018-2019, from April 2018 to November of 2018 for gasoline, and also from April 2018 to January 2019 for diesel. This has resulted in a budgetary revenue shortfall in those months, which prompted the government to keep the prices unchanged at $13.95 when oil prices started to decline towards the end of 2018. Mr. Speaker, as a result, the excise tax rate on gasoline and diesel exceeded $4 during the period December 10th to March 24th, 2019 for gasoline, and from February 11th to March 24th, 2019 for diesel. This was an attempt to recoup some of the revenue shortfall relative to the approved budget estimates of 2018-2019. Mr. Speaker, as we approach this new budgetary year of 2019-2020, excise tax rate has been set at $4 per gallon from March 25th, 2019. This has meant that then the prices at the pump were reduced to below $13.95 per gallon for both gasoline and diesel. Mr. Speaker, I wish to reiterate that the government's position remains one of targeting an excise tax rate of $4 per imperial gallon on gasoline and diesel, subject to retail prices that are below the price of $13.95. During the course of this budgetary year, international oil price movements will be closely monitored and the price cap will be reviewed, if necessary, with the goal of maintaining the $4 excise tax rate. Mr. Speaker, the fundamental objective of the government of St. Lucia's debt management policy is to raise stable and consistent levels of financing for the budget at a minimum cost, subject to prudent levels of risk. The preferred strategy of the government is to reduce cost and roll over risk by adopting a multi-pronged approach, which includes lengthening the maturity, paying down on its debts while at the same time negotiating more attractive borrowing terms. In 2018-2019, the Department of Finance implemented the strategy by refinancing $194 million of the $200 million in Treasury bills, earmarked for the conversion into notes. This activity was undertaken at no additional interest to the government. Of note, the investors who opted to remain in the Treasury bill arrangements received lower interest rates. Apart from maintaining its weighted average cost of borrowing at 5.3%, the rollover risk and debt maturing of 1 year was also reduced. The debt maturing in 1 year dropped from 24.7% to 18.3%, a reduction of 6.4%, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the Department of Finance will continue to reduce the stock of short-term debt to minimizing the rollover risk. In 2018, the Department of Finance hosted an investor relations workshop, which was geared at strengthening relations with existing and potential investors with the objective of reducing cost and risk inherent in our portfolio. In an effort to expand our investor base, we'll be conducting public education on alternative forms of investment for individuals who take advantage of the investment opportunities of the current environment for excess liquidity and low interest rates. This approach will target citizens here and abroad to invest in their country whilst obtaining a fixed stream of income. Alongside the Investor Relations Program, the Department of Finance will be undertaking the drafting of a public debt bill to promote transparency and accountability in debt management. Mr. Speaker, in December of 2017, the European Union listed St. Lucia, among other Caribbean states, as a non-cooperative jurisdiction for tax purposes. St. Lucia was then asked to commit to either amend or abolish the tax regimes deemed as preferential. The regimes identified were: 1, International Business Companies Act, IBCs, the International Trust Act, and 3, the Free Trade Zone Act. St. Lucia was also asked to join the Inclusive Framework on Based Erosion Profit Shifting, BEPS, spearheaded by the Organization of Economic Cooperation and Development, the OECD. Mr. Speaker, as per a commitment letter submitted to the European Union in January of 2018, St. Lucia committed to review the tax regimes identified with a view to amend or abolish. Additionally, a commitment was made to join the Inclusive Framework on Base Erosion Profit Shifting, the BEPS. All the requirements indicated by the EU were realized by December of 2018. Due to the requisite commitment made by St. Lucia, we were removed from the blacklist and placed on a gray list, pending changes in the tax regimes. Efforts were then focused on honoring the commitments made. Mr. Speaker, a cross-section of technocrats from both the public and private sectors worked in conjunction with international organizations to assess the EU's requirements in order to propose viable solutions which would address the EU concerns. As the House is well aware, Mr. Speaker, St. Lucia made several legislative amendments in 2018. In this regard, the suite of amendments included changes to the piece of legislation governing the tax regimes mentioned previously, as well as changes to the Income Tax Act, the Companies Act, and the International Partnership Act. Notwithstanding the extensive legislative work conducted in 2018, Mr. Speaker, there are still a few areas of concern which the EU has highlighted as not being in full compliance with their criteria. As per a letter received February 1st, 2019, St. Lucia was required to commit to revisiting the tax measures highlighted by the EU and to make the necessary changes by the end of 2019. St. Lucia has already made the requisite commitment. As such, we are not on the EU's blacklist, although we remain on the grey list until next year's assessment. We have commenced the necessary review whilst engaging the EU and the Code of Conduct Group. It should be noted, Mr. Speaker, that St. Lucia is not alone in this situation. Our Caribbean counterparts, such as Dominica, Barbados, Belize, are struggling to satisfy the EU's requests. In fact, Mr. Speaker, CARICOM has established a task force to deal with the EU matter. The task force has held talks with the EU and is working towards a more collaborative approach to addressing the concerns of all CARICOM countries, particularly as it relates to the blacklisting of its member states. Mr. Speaker, one may ask, why even bother? Do we need to comply? The answer to this is yes, Mr. Speaker. St. Lucia can ill afford to be on the wrong side of these international tax requirements. Compliance on international tax matters affects the investment climate, the availability of funding, and the general perception of a jurisdiction. As a small island developing state, we need to attract foreign direct investment and obtain funding in order to achieve the level and economic growth of development, which we need. This being said, Mr. Speaker, my government will continue its efforts in meeting the international standards on tax transparency and the exchange of information which have been set not only by the EU, but also by the Global Forum and the OECD. Mr. Speaker, we must at this point mention that in January of 2019, St. Lucia's tax regimes were assessed by OECD's Forum of Harmful Tax Practices, and we were found to be in compliance with their criteria. We're also in good standing with the Global Forum. So it is not all doom and gloom, Mr. Speaker. A lot of work has been done for which we should be proud. My government will continue its efforts in ensuring that St. Lucia remains compliant with the requirements for tax transparency and exchange of information as we foster a vibrant economy and improve the quality of the life of our people. Mr. Speaker, the budgetary proposals for the upcoming financial year are designed to achieve growth that will break the bonds of economic stagnation that has been holding back our country. And more importantly, our people. The two previous budgets that have built the foundation to cause this transformation, our restructuring of the economy has helped to put St. Lucia on a strong financial footing. And as a result, we have regained the confidence of business people and investors, locally and internationally. And now, today's budget, Mr. Speaker, along with the medium-term development plan that it finances, is the continuation of the government's plan to put St. Lucia in a position of strength, to have the people of St. Lucia to be in charge of their own destiny. Our aim is a St. Lucia where our children will receive an education that better prepares them for the world. Our prospect for access to quality health care will be improved significantly, where people will be able to find meaningful and gainful employment, and most importantly, to take care of their own families. A St. Lucia where young citizens have the opportunity to own a piece of their homeland and to grow their own small business. Where we have more reliable water supply and traveling around the country becomes easier. A St. Lucia where we are all safer. I'm asking all St. Lucians to fully embrace the bold direction we are going. As a nation, we have begun to see those positive signs, which have been absent for so long. This tells us we are on track with our plans. This tells us we are going on the right path and must stay the course. Opportunities lost today can never be recovered. This is going to be a very important year for our country. We must not allow ourselves to get distracted. And remember always that poverty, deprivation, underdevelopment, and critically, lost opportunities are truly our enemies. These are the things our government policies and their budget are designed to address. To be successful collectively, we must strive for excellence, always. We must take advantage of the opportunities before us and continuously lift each other up, not down. I call on all solutions to support the efforts being made in education, in sports reform, in curbing crime, in food security, in safeguarding the environment, and in assisting the most vulnerable among us. After 40 years, we must have learned by now that we are stronger when we work together. More importantly, when we are all in. May God continue to bless our beautiful island. I thank the House for its attention and the trust that all members will support this budget in the interest of our people. I thank you, Mr. Speaker, for your indulgence, and I look forward to a productive debate in the days ahead. Thank you.
Honorable members, the question is that the Appropriation 2019-2020 bill be read a second time. Honorable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I move that the House stand adjourned until Tuesday, April 16th at 4:30 p.m.
Honorable members, the question is that this House do stand adjourned until Tuesday, April 16th at 4:40 p.m. I now put the question. As many as are of that opinion, say aye. As many as of a contrary opinion, say no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Let me just remind honorable members before I just take my leave that you may recall that I did ask that today we shall take the official photo of this Parliament. All 17 of us are, 17 plus 1, 18 of us are here, and I would like to do so immediately after. This House do stand adjourned until Tuesday, April 16th at 4:40 p.m.
Well, you've just seen the completion of the presentation of the appropriation bill by the Honorable Prime Minister Alan Chastanet, also the Minister responsible for Finance. And the Primus, a delivery just about an hour and 40 minutes, so we were pretty close in our own estimation as to what would have happened. And we can tell you safely now that the debate on the appropriations bill will start tomorrow afternoon at 4:30 after the motion has been voted on and agreed that the debate will start tomorrow at 4:30 in the afternoon. Well, certainly a number of areas brought up by the Prime Minister in his budget statement as well that we can look at today, and he did first of all get his presentation going with a look at a number of key performance areas and the indicators that he wanted to look at, and one of them was certainly the fact of unemployment and how well the country was doing in that regard. He was also looking for a break from stagnation and pledged to do things differently. and also saying that jobs would have been a very strong aim of his government. He looked at positive growth in various sectors and also spoke about the fiscal performance of the government. He did go on to look at major infrastructure projects being undertaken, and then he was able to look at some tourism proposals, and quite interestingly, he gave another date for the commencement of the DSH program, and he singled out National Day 2019. Performance management was one of his main areas of concern as well, and he spoke about a delivery unit, performance management delivery unit, and I thought that was very instrumental in terms of getting a performance management unit, certainly to ensure that they were able to present and actually produce a number of projects, and that project had 5 main areas of focus which they would have needed to continue. Health sector, we did speak about that in our opening and how important it was, and the number of issues that came up both by the government and opposition, and the Prime Minister did recognize that it had been a vexing issue and that they had come under some criticism, but did try to reassure the public that the health sector would come in for some strategic attention, and did mention the 162 million, that allocation that would go towards that, and he did actually zero in on the OKEU hospital, speaking about the commissioning of other areas. You know that there have been some services already being done there, but saying that a number of other services will be commissioned soon, and the St. Jude Hospital definitely would have been mentioned, with the hospital now occupying the location of the George Odlum Stadium, and saying how distressful it was for patients. He thanked the doctors and the staff for their endurance so far, and for the sportsmen and women of St. Lucia who have been there for the stadium. He did mention a new 90-bed facility, and also spoke about newing there down at the site. So certainly a number of areas that he looked at. Just a few more before we actually hand over to you, Prime Minister. Education, unresponsibly said, the system to national development goals, and spoke about a new education strategy, and also an investment in the sporting facilities. We did mention it in our preamble as well, and specifically issues relating to development of facilities in Soufrière, Dennery, Miku, and the School of Excellence, something that has been touted in recent years. Very interestingly, I'm sure that the residents of Dennery would have loved to have heard that, and our musicians in general, with their plans for recording studios in Dennery and Damon, and citizen safety, because it is something that would have certainly gathered attention in terms of the crime situation in St. Lucia. And he did speak about a new strategy to tackle that tourism strategy as well, and was in depth in as far as the agricultural strategy and the restructuring of the marketing board, which you've seen has now been back into operation. We'll be winding up soon, primarily on some of the main points. He looked at competitiveness and productivity. He, in its latter part of his presentation, spoke of fiscal strategy, personal insurance tax reform, debt management strategy, and mentioned that the budget was designed to achieve growth. So I think in a nutshell, those were his major points. And now we see the members of Parliament getting together to get the photo that the Speaker, Andy Daniel, referred to. So, Primus, we had quite a filling today in the budget presentation by the Honourable Prime Minister and Minister for Finance.
Very much so, Ryan. Merci, Madame. Ryan, nous voulons faire ça vite, puisque la quantité pour parler à mais le Premier ministre a parlé sur l'augmentation économique depuis 2016 pour 2019, 8%. Il parlait de tout développement qui a fait, éprouvement économique, il consomme du travail, et pauvreté, et santé, et qui dit pile pour faire à ce faire ça là. Et pour raison ça là, Premier ministre parler de ça qui a fait la société, éducation, protection pour les citoyens, développement ça fait touristique, agricole et construction. Premier ministre parle sur développement touristique qui a payé $2 millions. Et il parle sur le programme CIPA qui a augmenté aussi. Il parle sur secteur santé qui a dépassé $162 millions pour développer le secteur santé. Et particulièrement développement OKI, ça c'est l'hôpital neuf là. Et aussi pour Saint-Jude, il a gagné 90 accommodations pour couche en Saint-Jude. Et aussi $8,4 millions à ce secteur santé. Et là, il y a aussi un développement pour la situation crime qui le gouvernement a dépassé pour réduire à ce crime nettement en cette ici. Et développement agricole, particulièrement en affaires figues, qui parle de augmentation des cultivateurs, les farmers, sorti 286 pour 740 en développement quantité cultivateurs, farmers, cultivateurs cette ici. Il parle sur marketing board a fait la pêche, département de la pêche, quel grand développement qui a fait à faire ça là. Et il y en a dans ces points qui permettent de mettre pile force à ce taxe. Le gouvernement a mis un grand soulagement, messieurs, mesdames, à faire taxe payée. Côté moun, particulièrement ça qui a un salaire qui est plus bas, qui a été un grand soulagement à faire taxe payée. Aussi, taxe qui nous fait à ce propriétaire. Le Premier ministre a mis un cher effort à ce quand on a un grand soulagement à faire ça là. Particulièrement, taxe généralement, le gouvernement, le Premier ministre l'a dit, cette ici a un grand soulagement à tout ça. Et c'est ça qui est parmi les plus importants développements qui fait à ce divers annoncements et à ce nouvelle messieurs mesdames en ces semaines pour venir moi défricher tièmement à ce divers développement à ces annoncements qui Premier ministre l'a fait pour le développement cette ici l'année là pour l'année financière là qui va venir.
Yes, Prime Minister, a good synopsis, a Creole segment there. And we are witnessing a very wonderful moment. We can remember that during the sitting of during the debate of the revenue and expenditure, the Honorable Speaker, Andy Daniel, did ask for this photograph, this photo session that we are seeing there right now. And I think that many persons who are viewing our broadcast are quite happy to actually see that the Speaker having an opportunity to get his request. He said that since he's been Speaker of the House, he's not been able to have a photo of the members of Parliament, and it really cuts a lovely picture, and we can see the Sergeant at Arms with the mace. And it was good to see while they were getting in the formation and the interesting way they have been placed. Really lovely. We can see the Prime Minister and the Speaker being next to each other. We also have the Leader of the Opposition up in the front line, as well as the Clerk of Parliament and the Deputy. Yes, providing that front line.
Right,
so
is this an unprecedented initiative? Is it?
Well, it's the first that I have seen it, and I know that the Speaker did ask for it. He wanted such a photo opportunity. I'm sure there must have been a similar photo maybe long before our time, and maybe not in the actual Parliament building.
Not that I can recall.
Opportunities.
Quite an interesting development for sure.
Yes, and it's certainly a very interesting way to bring the end to the proceedings this evening, Primus. So just a good opportunity for us to probably close off on our broadcast, and just to remind our viewers that the National Television Network and the Government Information Service will be keeping them abreast as to the developments as far as the debate is concerned, and to let them know that we will be here tomorrow afternoon for continued coverage of the presentation by the Prime Minister of the Appropriation Bill and the debate right here in Parliament, members of both sides.
Ok, merci autant Ryan, et merci mesdames, ça c'est côté notre bout programme face au public, à ce qui développement qui parlement aujourd'hui, que Ryan Do nous vie face au public, à la télévision nationale NTN demain après-midi à 4h30.
Yes, 4:30 we'll be here
pour ni débat
once more.
à chaque façade qui parle, ça c'est un qui tout intéressant que majeur toute cette série qui arrive pour demain à 4h30. Face au public à ce NTN.
Yes, well, on behalf of all of us here and all of the crew of the National Television Network and the entire Government Information Service, I'm Ryan O'Brien saying goodbye from Parliament.
Or rather allow, I am going to talk to